I want you to think about a crazy repair story. If you're in the restaurant business, we all have these stories that we have buried deep in the back of our mind. I just made a post on LinkedIn this morning about our opening day at the Navy Exchange. So Cali BBQ, we opened recently at the Navy Exchange. Huge opportunity for our brand. And I was going in doing videos with Eric, my chief financial officer. And of course, 2 hours before we open up to the public, our ice machine was not working. So I took a photo laughing about the situation, knowing that if it can go wrong, it will go wrong. But we're really excited today. We have Daniel Estrada, the co-founder and CEO of 86 Repairs. He is our special guest today, and we're going to bring up community members. If you're waiting, if you're watching this on LinkedIn, if you're watching on YouTube, if you are watching on Facebook, please share this. Please invite other community members. We believe a rising tide lifts all ships. We do this show every Wednesday, every Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time, and 6 p.m. London time. We appreciate you for joining. If you're new, we can't wait to get you on stage to hear your crazy repair story. Any questions that you have for Daniel? They just released a brand new report. It's the 2025 State of Repairs. That's a very insightful report. If you are a restaurant owner, if you own multiple restaurants, we would love to hear your story. Let's go ahead and bring Daniel up on the stage. Daniel, so grateful. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. Can you explain what is 86 Repairs and why did you become so obsessed with helping restaurateurs fix these crazy repair stories that I shared at the top of the show?
Great to be here, Shawn. Thanks for having me. I think before we even started 86 Repairs, I'm one of the two founders. We went and talked to a bunch of restaurant operators. And one of the questions I always ask them at the beginning of a conversation is, what's it like managing the repair process? And the answer I got over and over again is, it's a effing pain in my ass. And I heard that more than once, and usually with that same language. So we knew that there was a problem here not being solved by traditional ways that operators have tried to manage R&M. So that was really inspiring and motivating for us to go down this path, and we've been down it ever since.
Let's talk about just the entire category of repairs and maintenance. You guys released a report 2025. Some of those findings, we'll put a link into the show notes so that people are able to go and download that report. But can you high level give us some of the facts that you guys have uncovered?
Yeah. So, as a company, we've managed hundreds of thousands of repairs all over the country, and we collect millions of data points about repairs. It's one of the things that actually, when we started talking with operators, became a really clear gap in the industry is operators just don't have good information to make good decisions. And it's not their fault. It's just this stuff is all spread around. Nobody's really keeping track of it. There's a lot of financial incentives to not give you transparency into how much things cost. So it's been really hard for operators. So what we've done over the last 7-8 years that 86 has existed, even as an idea, is we've captured all this information. And so what we do, we've done now a couple of times, is release an annual report. So the 2025 report provides some insight on the last 12 months of data for 2024 that we have around things like how much are repairs costing in different service categories as an average. And of course, we can break that down for our customers by market or by specific asset. What are some of the trends around emergencies? How much more does it cost when you have an emergency issue versus, a lower priority issue? Trends on equipment, which brands of equipment? We have a few teasers in the report on some brands that are performing better from a repair frequency perspective, and how much it costs to fix those brands of equipment when you do have to service them. So things like that to help operators understand how to make better decisions, day to day, and hopefully start thinking about some ways they can reduce R&M cost, which has been a big pain point in the industry.
Sure. I think what gets me most excited when I met you and your co-founder and the entire team at 86 Repairs is it's always been a reactive category for me as a restaurant owner. Yep. It's kind of like, oh shit, what happens? Like, you hope that it doesn't happen, but we know in the back of our minds that if it's Mother's Day, if it's a Spring Valley tailgate barbecue, like, it is always the worst day that the equipment decides to break.
Yep.
And thinking about, if there was a better way, if there was software that allowed us to actually, when we did an unboxing of a piece of equipment, like, what happens to the warranty? What happens to all of these things? And how can you guys help restaurants manage those types of things?
Yeah, well, there's really three categories, right? And I think these are the three things of, I would tell any restaurant operator to try to reduce R&M cost, which is one of the big goals here. By the way, reducing cost is one aspect of this, but I talk to a lot of operators nowadays too, who think about their facility as number one, part of the guest experience, obviously, but also as part of their employee retention. We hear a lot, managers don't want to work in an environment where they can't do their jobs, right? Because equipment is broken, because they don't have pride in how the equipment works or looks, or how the facility looks. So we can talk more about that. I think that's a really important thing when you look at the big picture of why R&M is so important. But ultimately, the biggest goal operators have is to reduce cost, because it's expensive. And as you said, it's always an emergency at the worst possible time. So to reduce cost, it really comes down to three things. Dispatch avoidance. How can I avoid sending service companies when I don't really need them? And there are a lot of ways to do that I think operators are underutilizing. Asset management, right? So how do I understand more about the equipment that I have in my restaurants and make better decisions about that equipment in the moment and proactively, like capital planning, for example. And then vendor management. Who are the service partners who are working with me that are providing the best cost? And we can unpack that, what that means, but also the best quality, because quality and cost are very tightly connected. And they're also connected to downtime, right? When you have great service partners who are showing up, getting things fixed the first time, that makes a huge difference in the operation.
That's amazing. Well, let's get to the favorite part of the show, which is when we bring up our community co-hosts, our Rising Tide leaders from all over the globe. Just a reminder, please make sure your video is on, because as you all know in the community, we believe in repurposing content, omni-channel storytelling, and we want to make sure we get this content repurposed across all socials. So welcome to the community. Thank you guys for being here. Let's see. Riverside is having some fun today. We've jumped from studio to studio, but we will figure this thing out. This is like magical squares is what's happening here. As we get through the magical squares and Riverside figures this thing out, Daniel, tell me a little bit more about what you guys have planned for 2025. Where are you guys showing up? Let's start there.
Yeah, what we're seeing a couple things that we're seeing a lot in the industry. So we're seeing operators get more proactive, as you said. So doing things like capital planning, understanding what forecasted spend looks like, right? So I know how much I've spent historically. Now help me manage, for example, accounting accruals, so I don't get surprised in future accounting periods with, bills that took a long time to get processed or that I didn't receive from a service company. So being a little bit more proactive.
Trying to reconnect.
Side. On the asset side, knowing where I'm spending money, which specific pieces of equipment, which service categories am I spending money on, and where do I have potential problems there? So where's there equipment that I should be replacing? We can actually provide forecasted replacement cost or R&M spend, I should say, down to the specific asset. So we can tell you which assets are good candidates for replacement. So that's something that we've had a lot of interest in and had a lot of operators wanting to know more about and really use in their businesses. I think that's all part of a broader trend that R&M is a big cost category. It's the biggest controllable line item. And we spent so much time on food and labor and really beat up those categories. There's only so much you can do in those categories. So R&M is a place where there's real controllable cost savings.
Daniel, are you able to hear me? Riverside's having fun with me today. Do you repair virtual studios for broadcasting like
No.
Riverside?
I can make a couple calls for you though.
No. That is beyond the scope of work. Well, let's get to Unity. Troy Hooper, who are you? What are you working on a Wednesday? And let's share a pepper lunch repair story.
I probably look how I feel. I'm on day 6 or 7 of getting over a flu, and you'll see me just coughing my head off. When you're healing, that throat gets nice and dry and crackly, and now I just have a tickle and have to cough constantly. So I'm working on surviving the day again today, Shawn. Thank you for asking. Troy Hooper, CEO of Pepper Lunch. co-CEO of Pepper Lunch Worldwide, CEO of the holding company here in North America. We're opening 20 Pepper Lunch stores all across the country this year. And big fan of Daniel and 86 Repairs, as he knows. Had him on my show recently. My repair story is very recent. Or not repair story, but equipment sort of scenario story. We were standing on night 3 of our VIP pre-opening party at the Irvine Spectrum when everything in the building worked except for the Pepsi machine would turn off, and our induction heaters, the only thing we need to actually work in the building to make food, were not working. And I ended up rewiring around some power boxes because there was these shock boxes that we learned later were stopping irregular power from getting to our very sensitive equipment, which we really appreciate. And once we did that, we found out that our equipment actually already had those built into the equipment, and the code it was giving us was also saying irregular power. But we were holding people off. Then we told people to go away. Then we emailed them and said, come back, because it took us about an hour to sort it all out. I wish we had somebody to call, Daniel. But we got our general contractor on the phone on like a Saturday night at 8 o'clock. And, they're FaceTiming us from their living room, with a beer in their hand and telling us, put the red wire to the red wire and the black wire to the black wire, and try not to electrocute yourself. But not exactly the same kind of PM story or, RM story necessarily, but you got to have good people. You got to have their number, or you got to have somebody who can help you get it done. So we're big fans of what Daniel 86 does over there.
Thanks, Troy.
Troy, knowing Daniel and 86 Repairs, what help our community?
Yeah, so I think, and I said this when he and I talked on my show, is I think it's the most overlooked area of our business. I think that owners spend a lot of time worrying about payroll and ordering and inventory and reconciling and tracking down their money and, all that kind of stuff that we have to do every day. And as long as the equipment's working, we don't think about it. And that's a problem, because then it doesn't work. And the cost to replace or repair it when it could have been cared for along the way is a lot greater. And the impact on your business is a lot greater. I've walked into a Pepper Lunch in Las Vegas, and the fryer was down more than once. And then, okay, hey, what are we doing? Well, we're working on getting it repaired. Okay, great, whatever. I came in 3 weeks later, and the same stupid little countertop fryer that you would use in your living in your personal home was still on the counter, and the old fryer was still broken, right? So they didn't have a system, they didn't have a plan, they didn't have a process to either take care of the thing in advance, know that it was at the end of its life and it should have just been replaced anyway. And these are the kinds of things that 86 Repairs in this kind of system, or having a system. Like at the end of the day, Daniel will be the first to tell you, just have a system, right? Have a way of tracking your equipment. What is the useful life of a fryer? Is it 3 years? Is it 5 years? Well, it depends on if you paid $800 or $3,800 for the fryer, quite frankly. So it really just comes down to having a system. And I think we all just, take for granted that the walk-in's working today. Well, there's $60,000 of food in your walk-in. What happens when that walk-in's not working at 2 a.m. on a Sunday night of a holiday weekend, right? And you're going to find out on Tuesday at 10 a.m. when you come in, or whatever that is. These are real scenarios. This happens. We've all had stuff like this happen to us in our life. What system do you have in place to prevent or be prepared for the inevitable, which is the unexpected? Thank you for coming to my response,
Daniel.
Sorry, was that for me, Shawn?
Folks, Daniel. Daniel, yeah. Anything you want to share about what Troy just commented on?
No, I mean, Troy nailed it. The part of the gap here, or the challenge, is that this is one of those areas that doesn't get a lot of attention until suddenly it's your highest priority. And so there needs to be some thought proactively around how you're going to manage this, especially as brands are scaling, right? But we even see very large operators, hundreds or thousands of units, when we start talking with them, that really don't have a good process. Having a tool, having software is very different than having a good process. So what Troy articulated there, I think, is really, really important.
Jason Berkowitz, welcome to the party, the Riverside party.
Right. Glitchy like me, like all of us at times. We all have our good days and our bads.
Glitchy like all of us. Hey, we made it through Clubhouse. We made it through LinkedIn. We can make it through Riverside. We'll figure it out.
We all have our glitchy days. It's all good. The thing is, what do you do, right? You had people in place and a plan in place to call an audible and make it happen. So what's your audible play, I think, is where 86 comes in one piece of it, right? And I'll work backwards. My last consulting, right? So Jason Berkowitz, Arrow Up Training, longtime restaurant operator, partner, a lot of restaurants, and founder of Arrow Up, where we help restaurants satisfy compliance, level up teams, and develop supervisors into leaders. And one of the things that makes supervisors leaders is making it suck less to be a manager. And one of the ways you can make it suck less to be a manager is to minimize the distractions and the noise of the things that we don't like doing, so that we could spend time doing what we love doing, which is being with our people and our teams. And you can have a digital tool like 86. You can have a plan in place where you can manage it through there. I think even just having that you've aggregated who are the good people to use in your area is huge, so that even if you go old school and you print a little list that sits in the office next to the computer that goes plumbing, electrical, this, what happened, right? And who to call when is absolutely huge. And so to being able to track it. But I'm going to even work before that. A lot of you have heard me kind of say recently that I think checklists are mightier than trust falls if you want to build a healthy restaurant culture. And
I haven't heard that. That's good.
Oh yeah. I'm
Say that
repeating
more.
These stories. So yeah, it really is absolutely true. And so all of that can be avoided. A lot of it can, if you just had a system in place, whether you're going analog or moving to digital, which basically says, cool, we're going to change the ice filters. We're going to change this on a regular basis. And we've set it up. Something as simple as change the mop pad. It's not 86. It's not the repairs, but it's part of the repair and maintenance. It's part of the maintenance of a place that affects so much of not only the employee experience and the guest experience. So I'd like to think I was ahead of the game years ago, going in as my first role as a director in a company at Umami Burger. And I said, I think it was Ontario out here, who's our repair and maintenance and how often are they coming out to service? So it absolutely starts with a service checklist, as well as understanding that you've simplified where the noise is, so that you know when to replace stuff, who to call, and what to do if you need to call that person. Because going back to the first part about leveling up supervisors, yeah, man, if you can avoid the fryer going down and you can avoid these things going down, because it just sucks in the middle of business when it happens, and try to avoid it with a plan, but then know who to call so you don't have to spend all that time Googling and going on the text chain as we all did and do, which is like, who do you use? No. So that's jumping around a little bit to kind of talk about. I was really excited. And I think, we met a while ago, Daniel was, as 86 Repairs was coming into the fold as streamlining a lot of this. So as Troy said, and I'll leave you at this point, it's so overlooked how important repair and maintenance is in this cascading snowball effect of just unfun times in a restaurant that can be avoided. Back to you.
Well
So
said.
knowing the community, knowing the community as well as you do, is there a question specific that you can ask Daniel that maybe even if people aren't in the restaurant business, how they think of proactively repairs? I've had plenty of refrigerators go down in my house, equipment. Any kind of question that can help our community?
Yeah, talk to me. I think I heard this, and I know you do this, and it was maybe on one of the podcasts previously. Maybe it would have been with Andrew. I think this is a key moment where is I, should not be the one sticking my hand into the base of a ice machine when I think something's going down, and learned the hard way, fortunately not too hard, about the little fan that spins in the back that almost took my finger off, but took the flashlight out. You have a service where you call and the person can try to fix it over the phone, right? And they can walk them through it. Talk to us a little bit about that, because that would have been huge, having somebody to call and say, and I think that's so you don't have to wait. There's a lot that we can do and not have to call our GC like Troy did. Walk us through how often that happens, what that's like for somebody that could have said, now take the grate off, don't stick your hand inside yet. Did you unplug it? So talk to us a little bit about walking operators through that.
Yep. Yeah, it's a great question, Jason. And I really appreciate what you just said about being more proactive about the whole process, not just proactive about the repair when it happens, but planning for those situations in advance. One stat I can give you from our state of repairs report, those emergency requests, when something now has become an emergency, it's 27% more expensive than a lower priority request. So you are inherently, by working on something once it has become an emergency, spending more money guaranteed on that issue, because now you are paying overtime rates. You're paying to get people out on the weekend. You're calling your GC on Saturday night with a beer in his hand, right? Like Troy said. So that is more expensive and inherently will drive up cost. And so anything that you can do to get more proactive before the repair actually happens, those preventive maintenance checklists, right? Things like that drives cost down dramatically. And I think folks don't think about that. Certainly managers oftentimes don't think about it. They see an issue, they let it sit for a few days, and they don't do anything about it because it's not a problem yet. And then it becomes a problem. And now, you've got a tech out there on Saturday night. So I think that's super, super important point that you made. In terms of troubleshooting, there's a lot that you can do. We see an average dispatch avoidance rate of about 15% in our system. And not all of that is for troubleshooting, but a good chunk of it is. And being able to troubleshoot with the staff is different when you're talking to somebody. I've got an emergency, right? My fryer's not filtering, or it's not getting up to temp, and I can talk to somebody on the phone. That helps just to de-escalate the situation, right? Because these are still people. They're running around. They've got 50 things going on in the restaurant. Place is packed. You're a fried chicken restaurant and the fryer isn't temping and you can't cook, right? That is a huge, huge problem. And so being able to talk them off the ledge, try some things live, that is so much more effective than giving them a piece of software where they're just going to pencil whip a couple of questions and then send a service company, and somebody comes out for $350 and turns your gas back on, right? So those are simple troubleshooting things that, oftentimes staff, even when they're not comfortable getting technical, we certainly don't ask folks to pick up screwdrivers and do stuff like that typically. But checking some of the basics out will save you money on unnecessary service. And that's one of those big categories of, cost containment here is really around dispatch avoidance. The cost of getting technicians on site is going up, and it is going to continue to go up. That's a macroeconomic problem that we can't control. What we can control is how often we're using those service companies and for what.
Yeah, and if you can minimize it even by 15%, and I'll turn back over. Well, I know firsthand. I've gotten can you meet them at 7 in the morning? Well, what do you mean? Can I meet the repair person at 7 in the morning? I'm closing, and I'm closing tomorrow. So now it sucks. I'm a manager. I'm meeting them there. Not only that, I'm tired. And because I'm tired, I'm going to let all these other things slack. And because I'm going to let all these other things slack, all these unintended costs and consequences because of that, it just has such a snowball effect that I think I'm bravo for being able to take pole position in this conversation, because it really was an area that I believe in, and the ROI is there, and the RMI. So good stuff. That's my question.
Thank you, Jason. Michael Ungaro, San Pedro Fish Market. Are you?
I'm here. Am I glitching? Am I free? Am I in or out of the matrix? I can't tell.
Are you able to unmute? In. I can hear you. I can't see you, but I can hear you. And my producers, Stover and Mike, said that you look beautiful on camera. So keep looking beautiful.
I've got just the right amount of light coming through one window. Introduction. So Mike Ungaro, most of you know me.
Yeah.
Daniel, probably not. I'm the CEO and owner of the San Pedro Fish Market family of restaurants and the Kings of Fish TV show, currently streaming on Amazon season 1, and we are filming season 2 now, thanks to help from Shawn. We captured some great footage yesterday, by the way, at our new location where we signed a 49-year lease on 55,000 square feet of land to reopen our location that we had to leave. So it's pretty fun stuff. And we'll be opening another location in Monterey soon, 17,000 square foot on their historic Fisherman's Wharf. Got a note this morning that the city is, believe it or not, on track getting their stuff done. So we, I think we're going to be able to get in there by May, it looks like. So we can start working on that project. I think the offer, Daniel, I don't know a lot about it. I've just had for 86 repairs. I just had a little, I'm sick too, man. Me, Troy, a couple other people coughing. The flu, I got over the flu like 2 weeks ago and woke up sick again this morning. I never get sick. I don't know what this is. It's weird. I'm blaming my wife though, because she was sick yesterday.
Well, they call it the quademic. There's like 4 different things going around. And by the way, don't go to West Texas because there's measles too. So
it's insane.
Stay home.
She started teaching with kindergartners and first and second graders again, so I know that's what it is. It's all coming home, like when my kids are that age. Anyways, we at the height of our business, we had our two main locations were on 55,000 square feet. They shared seating, 3,000 seats, and I was trying to count in my head. I think we had 8 or 9 different kitchens, a lot of deep fryers, a lot of griddles, probably 14 griddles at our height, and we were doing about 2 million customers a year. I found some video. I think I posted it today in my story on Instagram of like how long the lines would be just waiting to get in the restaurant on a typical Sunday, not even a holiday, just typical Sunday. And it'd be about 100 yards long, if not longer, of people waiting an hour to 2 hours just to get in the building. So when any kind of equipment went out, and the ones that I would remember would be the hood going out above the deep fryers, or the deep fryer, or the hood and the deep fryer, or any combination of that, always on Mother's Day, or one of those crazy busy days when, you know, you're trying to pull something out and someone's crawling underneath it and oil splashing everywhere, and it's just a complete disaster. So, you know, as we're rebuilding and redesigning, and this is a great time for us because we're looking at what sort of systems can we implement that will help stay on top of that maintenance and avoid those breakdowns. Because, I mean, from you know, sometimes this is related, unrelated. I mean, the worst I remember is people trying to flush Corona bottles down the toilet and clogging the entire drainage system for the waterfront up. Not that you could cover that, but it was like that on top of equipment breaking, and it's always on a holiday, you know. So I've sent the links to all this to my operations team. We have a meeting later today, so because we're looking for offers like this as we're designing and building, because we're in this really unique place where, you know, we're operating out of a temporary parking lot. We really only have one sort of quote unquote real restaurant operating, because Monterey's, you know, it's in the design phase. Our San Pedro waterfront location, since we left those buildings and signed the lease, we're in a temporary location. We're actually in a parking lot still, and we're about to. Did I mute myself by accident?
Yeah.
So we'll be in I brushed up against the button. Sorry. We'll be in this temporary location that we're about to open. It's about a year behind schedule because of the city bureaucracy in LA, building and safety. But once it opens, probably late April, early May, that'll be on 30,000 square feet and about 1,800 seats. And it's designed to last. Our lease is only up to about 3 to 5 years while we rebuild, but it could stay there significantly longer. So we're in this really unique place where we're just hired architects. We're just doing sort of that bubble map and where will things lay and what equipment will we need, and we're signing contracts for pre-construction. So this is actually the optimal time for us to be involved with that. And it also makes a great storyline for because that's what we were doing yesterday. We were following a company that we're working with around. They do sponsorships with companies that provide things like asphalt and AstroTurf and concrete. And, you know, that will be storylines that we build into season 2 Kings of Fish, as we're not just working with the architects, but also just a lot of those places that, like, would you like to be featured? So a lot of opportunity there on the business building side, but also on just the lower the operational costs for us and keep the business functioning. So great stuff.
Daniel, any advice for Mike and the San Pedro team as they start making all these big purchases for equipment?
55,000 square feet. Good luck.
Most restaurant operators are going smaller, and Mike's going bigger.
Yeah, I was going to say, have you heard of right sizing your equipment footprint? No, congratulations, really exciting stuff for you all. In all seriousness, I think that's awesome, and you've obviously proven you can pull it off. So it's cool to see those kinds of success stories. I think you mentioned something that is really important that some operators don't think about, which is what is your goal in managing R&M more effectively, right? And you talked about the fact that you're doing high volume, so your goal is uptime. You can do this on an asset level, or you can do it at the restaurant level. You're talking about it at the restaurant level. Another example is, if my walk-in cooler goes down with $20,000 worth of food product in it, I don't care if it's under warranty. I'm not going to wait 3 days to get a manufacturer to approve a warranty call on that walk-in. I need it fixed right now. Yeah. So I'm going to call somebody, and I might spend a couple $1,000s fixing it, and that's worth it, right? That's a good decision in those situations. So I think the same thing is true when you just understand your business and your facility and use that to make decisions. I see a lot of one-size-fits-all kind of R&M processes being pushed into the industry, and if you're running a $1.2 million QSR concept that is running on tighter margins and is a lot more cost conscious, right? And doesn't have the cash flow to be, putting tons of money into repairs all the time. That's a very different, kind of process you want to set up. Maybe not a totally different process, but some of the decisions that you make and the way you make those decisions at each step are different, right? You might spend more time waiting for a warranty claim because you don't want to spend that money when you don't have to. But in your case, in a high volume establishment, time is money, and uptime, right, is critical. So you're optimizing for speed to service. And there's a few different ways to do that. I think most importantly, where the delays happen, yes, service companies, that is a challenge always. That has only gotten harder, right? It's taking longer to get service. That service is more expensive when it does come. So I mentioned vendor management earlier. Managing your relationship with your service companies is so critical, especially in your position. Pay their bills quickly, right? Take care of them, right? Simple things. Get your manager to buy them lunch while they're on site, right? The techs and the service managers at those service companies, the owners, depending on the size, should be your best friends in those situations. And what we see a lot in the industry is folks squeezing them on their hourly rates and, taking 60, 90 days to pay their bills. That is not a winning strategy anymore, because the buying power has really shifted away from the restaurant operator and to the service company. So again, macro problem, shortage of technicians, that's driving that. So I think managing, really optimizing those relationships with your service companies and not viewing those as transactional relationships is super important. And then making it easy for your staff to follow the process, meaning train them on what you want them to do. As you said, I think Jason mentioned this earlier, have really clear instructions and a process in place. Most of what we do, most of what 86 Repairs actually sells our customers, yes, it's software, it's support, it's data, but mostly what we sell our customers is we run a really comprehensive onboarding process with them, and we optimize that process in each of their locations. And I don't want to underestimate the value of that. That is really important. We've learned a lot about how to do this well. And so having a consistent process, whether you work with us or not, having a consistent process that your staff can follow. So it's really easy to report an issue, and so that issue gets followed up on very quickly through that process. That does cause delays as well, in addition to the vendor relationships. So
that's great.
Just some thoughts.
I'm so happy.
I appreciate it. And I found great value in those relationships with the owners of the companies and getting to know them, and always paying like on the spot when you can.
Yes.
Because it's uncommon, especially in the restaurant industry. I mean, I left my family business, my own, at one point, and I was thinking about this yesterday, how hard it was just to make, because it was a small place that I was testing. And how often we just, I don't think I paid myself ever. And I was trying to pay everybody else all the time. I was fortunate in that situation that I had the reputation of where I came from, that people were willing to cut me some slack on that. But it was like, it kept me up at night. Like, it was just anxiety ridden, because I knew that at any point, anyone that was paying on time was going to get called. Their call was going to go first over mine.
Yep.
As it would be, it's a business. You need money to survive. So
That was
thanks. Good stuff. Appreciate it.
Daniel, the fact that you talked about the hospitality that for service technicians, it's something that is it's never talked about. I mean, I think, but that's the essence of this community. That's why we believe a rising tide lifts all ships. We believe everyone's in the hospitality business, but if we don't take care of the people that are literally, oh shit, my ice machine broke down, can you come at 11 p.m. on a Friday night to come and fix it? But it's those personal relationships. It's like, how can we take care of the people that are on our oh shit dial list, and how do we actually prioritize those relationships? Great stuff. Thanks, Mike. Elizabeth Doss, take 60 seconds. Who are you? What are you building? And what's your question for Daniel? Repairs.
Yeah, sure. Elizabeth Doss here. I'm a motion graphic designer and social media consultant, and I work with brands and businesses in the area of gift. I speak gift.
Yes, look at that. ABB, always be branding. I love it.
And I teach them how to use humor and harness their thought leadership across social platforms to get attention and increase engagement, all those wonderful things. So very quickly, I was actually super excited about this conversation. Normally, I don't have much to add to the restaurant hospitality side of things, but I have a unique relationship. My father-in-law actually was the facilities manager for a very large restaurant chain, and I've been asked not to disclose the name of the restaurant chain, but for 11 years, he was over 100 restaurants across the United States. It's a very common place. But so this morning I got on the call with him and I was like, okay, give me some of the worst stories that you've got for this. And so one thing that came out of it was the need for investigations about why are these things breaking down that they were running into. So if you'll indulge me, I'll do this as quickly as possible, but I thought some of these stories were bananas. There was one year where every single week, a car hit the building. It would hit the porch, it would hit the building across the United States. There would be, and so they realized that their ADA parking and the demographic of people that were coming to this restaurant needed to strategically hide the concrete barriers and the steel barriers so that no guests would be injured on the porch as they were waiting for their table. And so that became a very consistent. So they not only had to do it at the restaurants where the accidents happened, but they had to do it across the country because they didn't want this to keep happening. He then told me there was a Houston restaurant, an 18-wheeler on the interstate right nearby, lost the tire. It went down the embankment, went through their parking lot, didn't hit anybody, bounced on the porch, went through the front window and landed on an empty table. And you're like, wait, what? And the only person that was injured was someone who leaned in the broken window and got cut. And he's like, what? Why would you? Anyway, but they were fine. So they called him as a facilities manager and he said, did you call the police? And they were like, well, no. And he said, call the police because they'll probably find the 18-wheeler and let their insurance company pay for this. Sure enough, the next exit down, there was an 18-wheeler that had lost a tire. And so they were able to get all of the insurance stuff, things figured out. The last story I'll tell, because I have a bunch if you want to hear some more. We had a lot of fun this morning and he was laughing because he's retired now and he just, he's doing this all manually and he's getting these repairs and having to call these in all over the country. So he had his notebook of people that he would call to get that. So like that window, he had a guy in San Antonio that he had, again, hospitality wise, built a relationship with. So he knew he could call him and have him there start to get there within the hour to cover up the hole in the window to start that, that whole process. But in their kitchens, they had like 24 to 30 tons of air conditioning equipment above each kitchen just to try to keep it cool enough for everything that they were doing. And this was a breakfast heavy place. So they had an industrial toaster and they were in the afternoon, they were running into how hot it was. So he came to one of the places with a temperature gun and it was registered, the temperature gun capped at 425. And he said, guys, the breakfast rush is over. Turn the toaster off, and turn the industrial toaster off. Go get a $10 toaster because only like 3 people want toast in the afternoon. And stop running this because we're having to use 3 tons of AC to deal with this toaster thing. Sorry, I did say that was the last, but here's the real last one. He came in one day and saw a woman at the end of clothes who was spraying down the kitchen with a water hose. And he had been told, if you see a water hose in the kitchen, you need to cut that thing up. Guys, there's so much electric equipment, all these things. This particular restaurant, their industrial potato masher had broken down over and over again. And every time the repairs came back and said there was water in it. And they were like, how is this happening? And then realized girlfriend was not using a mop and bucket, and she was spraying down all of this equipment and destroying things. And so what he was saying is sometimes there has to be like investigative side of that. So that's my question for you, Daniel, as I throw it back to you is, these repairs that are constantly coming up and realizing that some of it there may need to be an investigation for the mystery that keeps happening. Anyway, thanks for letting me share. I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, no, it's great stories. Thanks for sharing those, Elizabeth. And some of those I've not heard before. So good food for thought. I would say the tracking piece that you mentioned is critical, and I would connect the dots between that, not just for investigative purposes, but also for understanding where the money is going. This is really important. One of the things we see a lot is that operators are spending money on certain things over and over again, and they don't have any visibility to that. And it's because they're not tracking this information in a consistent way and having, I'll get a little nerdy here for a second, having structured data, right, about what's actually happening in the restaurants. And this is a bigger problem as you get bigger. When you have a couple of restaurants, you can kind of see the trends in your head, right? The patterns start emerging. I just fixed this thing, a month ago. But when you start getting bigger and those decisions are spread out across different managers, different districts, right, different facilities managers, now it's much harder to see those trends, and you need reporting, and you need to be able to understand that. So the way to track and understand what's happening is to know what happened in each situation and be able to connect those dots through reporting. So I'll give you one example. On our side, we had a customer who we noticed plumbing cost up pretty dramatically quarter over quarter, and over the course of about 3 or 4 quarters. And what we were able to do, having that insight, you can go into the plumbing category, and you can see that certain locations, and in this case all of the locations, had increasing plumbing costs. Well, they realized there was a defect in the construction kind of process or the spec for the building, where they hadn't installed proper covers on the floor drains. So stuff was getting down there and getting stuck, and they were having to jet their lines and have lines snaked and things like that. So that was driving up the plumbing cost. Well, that was worth about $120,000 a year in unnecessary plumbing cost, right, for a $15, $20 drain cover. So there are things like that you can only pull out when you have data and insights about what's happening in the facilities. And often operators don't have that because there isn't a mechanism to make it easy for the staff to report issues and then actually capture all of that data. If you expect your general managers to log all of this stuff and track it, I can tell you it's not going to happen. And that is one of the big mistakes in the industry, is that folks have tried to implement these systems and shove them down people's throats, and it doesn't go well. So you need something that's really focused on capturing that data so that you can see those patterns and then take action on those patterns.
Wait, but we all have to play the guessing game of what restaurant was Elizabeth talking about. I'm going to say I'm going to take the first crack because I now believe it's Cracker Barrel.
Cracker Barrel. Wow. Okay.
Well, 100, she said something like that, which meant Denny's is too many locations.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, when she kept saying porch, she gave it away because she kept saying people waiting on a porch near a highway. When she said equipment.
Are you trying to break news here, Troy? Elizabeth did such great work. She came under NDA, and you're over here blowing up her spot.
And Elizabeth can't lie.
She gave too much away.
Elizabeth, that was fantastic share. I brought back all kinds of PTSD. I have so many questions about insurance and all kinds of things to ask Daniel, but I'm going to let Richard take the mic. Richard, it's your turn. Go for it.
I'm gutted that Troy didn't see the chat, because I'm definitely claiming Cracker Barrel. And all I'm going to say is a guilty pleasure of mine. I like the applesauce and little games that you play. Anyway, that's a guilty pleasure of mine. I'm Richard. I'm not American. I live in the UK. I run a business called Richard Solutions with the mantra of don't be boring, which is coaching, mentoring, consultancy and branding. And I think what's really interesting, I often have to repair leadership teams, not equipment, which is great because I'm rubbish with my hands. Which is like perfect for me because I get to work with business leaders and help them. What's really interesting, we often joke in the UK that the McFlurry machine at McDonald's doesn't work. And I thought, well, maybe it's just a British thing. No, it's the US thing as well. There's a really hilarious website called McBroken.com. And if you go on McBroken.com, it goes around all your local McDonald's and it tells you if the McFlurry machine's working and also the current stats. And I think it's something like 14 to 15% of all McFlurry machines in the US are broken. I'd like to say that the UK, we're about the same. But I think what's really amusing about it is that, you know, we laugh about it. And I think what's hilarious is it's one of those things that's preventable. And I guess my question for you, Daniel, is like for a large chain, I get that 14% of all your machines not working is actually a website people are laughing at you. It's a bit embarrassing. Sorry, McDonald's. You do some things well, but not McFlurry's machines that work. But what's really interesting, do you find a difference between sort of independent or sort of small operators and large operators? Because one of the challenges I've certainly found with small businesses is almost that disaster planning. So when everything's fine, everything's hunky-dory. There's a British one for you, Shawn. Hunky-dory.
Thank you.
You can steal that. But when everything's hunky-dory and everything's working fine, people don't notice. But when it goes, and here's another British expression for you, tits up, then, you know, the shit hits the fan. Do you find that independents struggle with that planning more than the large sort of organizations? And if so, what tips and advice would you give them around planning? Do you put money aside each month? Or because you're absolutely right, a GM's never gonna tick that box, never going to happen in a month of Sundays. So what advice would you give?
Great question. The McFlurry machine is an oft discussed topic in our space, as you can imagine. And I'll give you an interesting piece of insight that only we have. About 27% of the time that there's a problem with an ice cream machine, that is either related to the solution is either to reset the unit or to clean it. And this has been a big point of contention with equipment suppliers, right? Is that operators often are not following the recommended maintenance procedures, right? So we were talking about maintenance checklists before. This is a very simple way to keep equipment running longer, better. And you don't have to be big to do this. It's just something that you have to be proactive about. So most restaurants have a handful of equipment that's mission critical. They can't run the restaurant without it. Or they have menu items that are high margin and contribute either a lot of margin or a lot of revenue to the restaurant. Those should be the pieces of equipment that you as a restaurant operator, you can pull the service manuals, you can talk to the manufacturers of that equipment or talk to your equipment dealer, and they will have recommended maintenance procedures, and those should be followed. You know, maybe not every single one of them, but the vast majority should be followed regularly to avoid these kinds of issues. And again, the data bears this out. So I think it's a really interesting example. Again,
that's great.
Small operators, large operators can avoid these issues. It is true, I think, that small operators don't have the people, the infrastructure, the organization in their companies to do something with insights that they pull out of data or out of tracking of repairs. So it's harder to take an insight like, oh, I've got a pattern of plumbing issues, right? And turn that into an action, because your folks are a lot more day-to-day focused than they are working kind of on the business. When you get to a certain scale, you have more people in roles working on the business rather than working in the business. And so it is harder to do something with the information. I will say, however, that even very large operators struggle with this, and it gets harder to build a culture and a standard consistent process the bigger you are, because now you have a lot more change management to do across the organization. So I wouldn't say that bigger organizations are better at this, not necessarily. Some of them are, but some of them just never built that discipline internally. And so, and again, it's not a criticism. It's just there's a lot to focus on in the restaurant industry.
And I think that's why I asked about McDonald's, because I think what's hilarious about McBroken, please, everybody go on that website, because like I said, just see your nearest McDonald's if the ice cream's working, especially for you sunny lot in California. There's that little bit where,
I like it.
but there's that little bit where you think to yourself, how can an organization as big as McDonald's have that much of an issue? And if you go back and watch the Founder movie, it was actually all about his milkshake machine that changed the course of that whole thing. And I think what's really interesting when I look at somebody like Troy and Michael is how do you have that planning and that process in there to avoid those kind of things? And how can I then take that as an example into the businesses that I work for? And I think what's so interesting, like I said, is a company as big as McDonald's having a problem like that on a global scale, you know, it almost not gives independents hope, but gives them almost something, well, look, nobody's perfect, which I think backs up what you're saying, Daniel.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's also important to understand that McDonald's is not, 35,000 restaurants globally. McDonald's is 10,000 franchisees globally, right?
Yeah.
And it's actually probably less, probably more like 5,000 or 6,000. But you've got all these operators. I think McDonald's averages 10 or 11 units per operator, and you've got all these different operators running a process. And it's actually, McDonald's is an amazing example of an organization that scaled that far because they have a lot of discipline and rigor around process. And that's why McDonald's is McDonald's. So it's pretty amazing what they've been able to accomplish, but it's hard. It's hard either way.
And I'm going to jump in really quick to finish that, which is that's that small operator that you're either doing it or not doing it. I would say 75% of the problems with ice machines are you didn't change the filter. You just, that's it. It's that simple. So it's the other saying, Michael, here's another one for you, right? What's urgent, I guess it's not as cool, but we focus on what's urgent over what's important. And then what's important becomes what's urgent. Changing your filters and putting that in is important. And if you don't take care of it, it becomes urgent. So that was the point, Daniel. It's 6,000 independent franchisees. You can give all the systems in the world, but is somebody actually going to do it? So it's about prioritizing that in our own lives and just doing it. Put it on a checklist and get it done.
Right.
Amazing. With respect to Daniel, do you have a hard out in 8 minutes?
I'm good. I saved extra time for you.
Perfect. Well, we've got a couple more of our community members to share. Ian, you're up. Who are you? What are you working on? And what's your question about the state of repairs or crazy restaurant story? Something you can ask Daniel.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. Ian Hawksworth with EHS Recruiting. Help restaurants and hospitality companies find managerial talent, focusing in SoCal and nationwide. Some of my background actually is from convenience store management operations and from HOA condo management operations. So maintenance actually ties into this quite a bit for me. It's wild to think about, having schedules, and so many managers have a schedule of things you need to do, but it doesn't take into account how old the equipment is, all those extra details that might alter that schedule over time. So having, a more sophisticated plan definitely goes a long way. And then I know Jason and Daniel both touched on it a little bit, but the hidden cost of the maintenance in terms of how taxing it can be on your staff. So, no one wants to work at the restaurant where the fryer goes down every 2 weeks or whatever it is. Like, the customers are screaming at you. You can't provide some of your most popular items. You're doing damage control constantly. That's just extremely taxing, and that's burnout waiting to happen. And then you end up having turnover, and then who gets blamed for the turnover is the other managers. And it's like, actually some of that was a maintenance expense. It's just hidden in a different category. So, there's a lot of things that all work together in these types of operations. So I always like to tie it back into the people side of the business a little bit, but it can go a long way to keeping your people happy and productive and just focused on doing what they love to do in their job. And that's usually making the customers happy and not having to deal with chaos nonstop.
Yep. Yeah.
You got a question? You have a question for Daniel, Ian?
Yeah, I was curious, just how the systems that you have work tying in, like extending that calendar and tracking the equipment over time. Like that's pretty awesome feature to have, because like I said, it changes over time. So is there a little more detail you can give on, how restaurants can better take that and put it into practice?
Yeah, it's good, really good call out. I was actually just on a call with the COO of a 550 unit, I think, restaurant brand last week, and he said almost exactly the same thing you said. He said, we have recruiting cost, right? Cost of turnover that manifests as cost of turnover, but is actually because when we do exit interviews with employees, they share feedback with us that the store was constantly in bad shape. No money was being invested to improve it, right? They didn't feel like they could do their job. So that's a huge thing, and it is very much a hidden cost. In terms of how you track kind of assets, we talked a little bit about asset management earlier. I think there's basic information that, again, as you grow and scale, is much harder to keep track of. You can kind of do it in your head for a while, and then it gets beyond that sort of institutional knowledge space. And so what we want to track on assets is warranty, which also gives you age of the asset. So is a piece of equipment under warranty, and how long is that warranty? That tells you when the asset was put into service. Replacement cost. So how much does it cost to replace this piece of equipment? And then as I start accruing cost, as I start understanding how much money I've spent on that specific asset, I can also understand when it's time to replace it, when it hits that 50% or 70% threshold that I'm looking for. Those are two big things. And then, of course, service history, which I just sort of implied, right? You want to know what was done on that equipment. Even for our customers who have internal technicians and people who are working on this equipment and who kind of can keep track of it a little bit, knowing what the history was of that equipment, which parts were replaced on something, that kind of detail can be really helpful when you're making capital planning decisions or even at the next repair. So we use all of that data to flag, for example, when a repair, when a piece of equipment has been repaired 3 or more times in the last 90 days. Our system escalates that to somebody on the management team to say, hey, you might want to look at this. Maybe we shouldn't throw any more money at this piece of equipment, or maybe there's a bigger problem. Troy mentioned earlier some infrastructure things that can masquerade as equipment problems, right? Electrical supply, gas supply, things like that aren't actually a problem with the equipment. So I think there's a really, really important piece here of understanding the equipment with as much detail as you can. And the step that gets missed is just putting that information in. It's time consuming. It's hard. It can be expensive. But operators who take the time to do that can then make decisions with that information. So we do it as part of our onboarding process for our customers. Even for operators who are working with us, I would recommend think about those, especially those most critical pieces of equipment, and track that information somewhere so that when you're making a decision, you can go back and reference it.
That's awesome. Great question, Ian. Thank you. Hildy, thank you for being here. Go for it. You're up.
Hi, thank you so much. And I really appreciate what you do for a living. I couldn't do it. Couldn't. Like the logistics of it. So good for you. I'm curious to know, what is your area of location? How far will you go from where your company is based? And then do you ever, it's not the word farm out, but like I happen to know of a plumber in Santa Monica. Do you ever resource those things out? And if you do, how do you figure out like who are the good people, who are not the good people? So that's my question. Thanks.
Great question. One of the problems in the restaurant industry and in other industries has been that we have built solutions, tools, vendor marketplaces, software tools that make money from service companies and from restaurant operators. And they've created this perverse incentive in the industry to drive up service volume. So if I'm a vendor marketplace and I make money every time I send you a plumber, then my incentive is not to avoid that visit. My incentive is to send you as many plumbing visits as I can because I'm making money from that service company. 86 does not do that. We're the only solution in the industry that doesn't to mark up invoices, charge service companies fees to be on our platform, or make it harder for them to work with their own customers through our platform. So, and I cannot stress enough how important that is. And I talk to a lot of restaurant operators who they just don't know. There isn't any transparency about those business models. So I would, that's one important kind of scene set, I think, is understanding who's getting paid by whom is really important in this whole picture. We work with third-party service companies, so we don't employ any of our own field technicians who are out servicing the equipment. We work coast to coast, all 50 states actually. We have nationwide coverage, so I'll include Alaska and Hawaii in that group. We have customer locations in both. And the reason we're able to do that is because we can allow our customers to work with any service company that is doing good work in that market. So we will help operators find good partners. We have thousands and thousands of service companies that we've worked with all over the country, but also our customers can bring service companies with them who have done good work. So if you have a plumber in Santa Monica who's doing great work at your restaurants, that's perfect. We want that to continue to be a relationship. And that really connects to what we were talking about earlier, that optimizing these relationships is a much, much better strategy than making this transactional. We saw a lot of companies 5-6 years ago spring up that were sort of like the Uber for service, right? And that sounds like a great idea. Oh, I put in a request for a plumber and 5 companies will send me a note with their hourly rate, and then I can pick one, and I'm usually picking the cheapest one, which is not always a great idea. And that sounds great in principle, but what that does is it makes the whole thing transactional. And in a world where we have fewer skilled tradespeople out in the industry, fewer of those field technicians actually qualified to do the work, that is driving up cost for the operator and for the service company. So I have, as you can tell, very strong opinions on this topic, but I think really important. So we do work with third-party service companies, but we do not make any money from those service companies. And we recommend them based on their performance. So we track first-time fix rate, mean time to resolution, a handful of other metrics around the quality of their communication, things like that. And then we help operators make changes to the service providers that they're working with in order to optimize quality, meaning reduce downtime, fixing things more quickly the first time around, and then of course reducing cost because of that. So that's it's a really, really important way to manage cost and quality, is to manage those service provider relationships.
That was a great question, Hildy. Thank you. Steven Swiderski, last but not least. What's your question for Daniel? Are you able to unmute? Are you deep in catering and events? He's so focused, he's not even listening to me. Steven, we love you. We appreciate you. Let's go ahead and do a tip takeaway homework assignment. Troy, kick us off. Thank you for being here. Thank you guys for hanging tough with the Riverside streaming. We will figure it out. Thank you to Mike and Stover in the background, getting the community to switch over. You guys are amazing. Thank you. Troy, go for it.
My takeaway is to have the live chat up on the sidebar so I don't say stuff everybody else has already said. That's why everybody laughs.
That's your own takeaway?
Yeah, that's my takeaway. Look, I think the audience has gotten a lot of takeaways out of this. And for the operators that listen to this after the fact, I hope it is that they get more serious about repairs and maintenance and preventative maintenance. And by the way, we didn't even talk about all the other benefits of what 86 Repairs does, which, just cataloging all your equipment and having a repository of what you own and how old it is and when is it due for repairs and what is the code for the gasket when it goes bad, or the thermometer or the digital thing, so there's a lot to it. And I think it's a great service. So thanks for coming on and chatting, Daniel.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Troy.
Thanks, Troy. Jason Berkowitz, takeaway homework assignment.
I love just the takeaway. I love the hospitality component in everything that you do. In anybody who shows up at your door, right? There's somebody, they deserve that respect of it. It's just, I love when good business overlaps with being good. And so I just love that component that you brought into it. The other component that I think you've touched on that was fun was, if also they're being held accountable, both are being held accountable, right? Somebody's on your platform, which means there's some sort of care that they've taken for this, which means when the impaired people come, they know that they're working with somebody who has an element of care and organization. Also, they themselves have to earn their keep on your platform, I would assume, by doing good work, or they're kicked off. And so there's an element of accountability, mutual accountability that is inherent there that I think is powerful. So that's also a takeaway that I read between the lines on that, which is cool.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason. I appreciate you. Richard Liverman, what's your tip, takeaway, homework assignment?
Yeah, Daniel, thank you very much. Really interesting listening to you. My takeaway is never to have a window seat in a Cracker Barrel ever again.
Great tip.
That is a great tip, Richard. Well done. Mic drop moment. Elizabeth, you get a rebuttal. What's your tip, takeaway, homework assignment?
Oh, first off, I just wanted to show you all the notes from my call with my.
That was amazing.
I didn't even touch like half the stories. Anyway, no, I really appreciated the part, what Daniel, when you were sharing about the data part of this, that being able to see over time any patterns that are showing up, and it helps you kind of diagnose and really dig in. And like you said, solve a $100,000 problem with a $10 to $15 part. I thought it was a great way that you guys are tracking that information to be able to kind of dig in a little bit more. So thank you so much for coming.
Amazing. Thank you, Elizabeth. A quick programming note for Friday. We're doing Storytelling 101. So community call. We have no special guest. If anybody wants to join, please let us know. You can go to betheshow.media/rising tides, and we will get you on the live show to come up, talk about your storytelling tips. Michael Ungaro, tip, takeaway, homework assignment. Thanks for being here.
My Zoom in takeaway is going to be the McBroken website, which I'm going to share everywhere. So thank you for that. Plus, it's also it's soothing to know you're not the only one. Broken. As I zoom out, what I'm thinking is, in the restaurant industry, as I think all of us know, it's like it's so labor intensive and so easy to just get task oriented. Just give me my checklist and tell me what to do, and let me go home and don't bother me anymore. But knowing that there's this technology, as technology is advancing and it's rapidly changing the marketplace and the economy, and creating all these opportunities to avoid the cost of breakdowns, fundamentally, and so many different places. And I've been exposed to so many of them with what you've put together here, Shawn, and all the different people that you've invited on these calls. And this is just the next one for me to check out and learn from. So thank you all.
I appreciate you, Mike. Thanks for being here. Ian, tip, takeaway, homework assignment?
Yeah, tied into what Michael just said, I think the tech and, people don't think of a lot of the maintenance and skilled trades and everything as being, having tech integrations, but, having those features out there is pretty awesome, and making sure people are aware of them and know how to utilize them going forward. I think that's my takeaway from the show today.
Awesome. Thank you, Ian. Hildy, thanks for being here. We appreciate you being part of the community, always showing up.
So one thing I will tell you is that I go on a stage in front of 300 people every month and tell stories. So I could definitely help on Friday. I'm even going to reach out to my storytelling coach and see if she is available to join us. So I'll get back to you on that. But here's a tip having a little bit to do with restaurants that everybody needs to hear. Because of what's going on in the world right now, if anybody is thinking of ordering, socks or tote bags overseas, there are things being held up in customs. So we need to add like an extra month, because I ordered myself tote bags and they are still stuck in customs.
Hey.
Not that anybody in this call might be ordering any of those things, but I'm just.
That's Hildy's roundabout way of saying, Troy, get off your ass and place the order already. Everybody understands.
Troy, if you want to be branding at all of the shows at your pickleball tournament at Restaurant Leadership Summit,
you know what she's talking about.
Restaurant Leadership Summit, you're not going to look good if you're not branded out, Troy.
Hey, no offense, Shawn. The only reason Hildy showed up today was because she knew she could nail my ass on screen.
That is master storytelling. I mean, that's probably the best tip for Friday. Is the best way to get a deal done is do it over media.
Game within the game.
The game within the game. Fantastic.
Oh
no.
Checkers. We're all playing checkers over here, and Hildy's playing yes.
Fantastic. Daniel, thank you for your time. We appreciate you. We appreciate 86 Repairs. Any parting words? Where can we get the state of repairs? How do we get that report, and how do we keep connected to you guys?
86repairs.com. I appreciate everybody's great questions and insights. I love the takeaways. You all nailed it. So nothing to add from my side, but I appreciate the conversation. Always great.
Amazing. Stephen, any parting words from you? We missed you on mute. I was talking to you. You look deep in. You were too busy booking weddings and big caterings for Cali BBQ, which we appreciate.
Yeah, sorry. I apparently turned my volume all the way off.
I sound better that way.
I don't know how.
I didn't notice. Nobody was talking.
I'm also going through a bunch of resumes right now. So
there you go.
That's the biggest thing I've been doing. No, just enjoyed the conversations. And Shawn, we should get Vince on one of these calls.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Friday we should get Vince on for sure. Well, thank you, Daniel. Thank you to the community. We appreciate you. Thank you, Stover, Mike, Sydney, 86 Repairs for helping us set this up. You guys are amazing. Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time. And great show today, guys. Thank you. Thank you, Daniel.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Yeah, Shawn.
Good day.